Have you ever asked or thought to yourself why this world works the way it does?
Or questioned how a bicycle works?
For example, why is it harder to start biking?
Or why is it harder to bike while wearing a backpack?
Or why is it harder to bike on sand?
Well, Newton's 3 laws will answer all your questions.
Newton's
First law is the law of inertia. This law states that objects in motion will stay in motion, and objects at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an external force.
Newton noticed
That objects do not randomly change their motion without something causing it to change. Using the example of a bicycle, you can see that the law of inertia applies. It's very difficult to pedal the bike at rest because the bike will want to stay in that state. This is why people run and then jump on their bike. Since the bike is already at motion, it is much easier to start pedaling. When you're already biking, it is easier to continue because the bike is already in motion. If you hit your brakes really hard, then your body will keep going forward, even though your bike is stopped. This is because your body wants to stay in motion even after your bike has braked.
From a mathematical standpoint, we can see that when the net force is zero, the acceleration is also zero. This is because when there's no unbalanced force acting on the object, it will tend to stay in the constant motion that it already was in, with no change in speed. However, an object will accelerate if there is an unbalanced force acting upon it.
Newton's second law states the acceleration of an object is proportional to the amount of force exerted on the object relative to the mass of the object. When you're riding a bicycle, this relationship also applies. The more mass you have on your bicycle, the more force required to bike. If the same amount of force is exerted, but the mass was increased, the bike would go slower. On the flip side, if more force was added, or if some mass was removed, then the acceleration would go up and the bike would go faster. This relationship can be shown through Newton's equation, F is equal to ma. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. In this relationship, net force is proportional to acceleration when the mass is constant, which means that as net force increases, the acceleration will also increase. Also, if net force is constant, acceleration will be inversely proportional to mass. This means that when mass decreases, the acceleration increases. Due to this relationship, having a greater mass will result in a greater net force needed to retain the same acceleration.
Newton's third law states that
in every interaction between two subjects, there is a pair of forces acting on each of them. The size of the interacting forces are the same.
when riding a bike, the tires push against the ground backwards, so the ground pushes back against the tires to propel the bike forwards. To better understand this concept, if two people push each other, they are both pushed backwards.
They both experience the same amount of force, but when one of them is bigger than the other will be propelled back more because of the second law. The one with lower mass will experience more acceleration.
When the bike pushes on the earth, both the earth and the bike are pushed away from each other. But since the earth is much bigger than the biker is propelled forward. If the biker biked on the sand, the individual sand particles will be propelled backwards, which makes the biker unable to propel themselves forwards as effectively. The force of object A on object B would be the same size as the force of object B on object A, but the direction of the forces would be opposite. The force of the bike tires gripping onto the earth is reflected onto the bike and allows the bike to move forwards.
In this video, we have shown you how Newton's 3 laws can be applied to bicycles, which is something that many use frequently.
The reason it's harder to start biking is because the force needed to pedal the bike when the bike is at rest is significantly greater than when it is in motion.
In addition, it is harder to bike
While wearing a backpack.
because we need more force exerted to support the increased mass.
Finally, the reason why it is harder to bike on sand is because the sand particles do not push the bike forward as effectively as a hard surface such as the road or the sidewalk. However, Newton's 3 laws do not only apply to bicycles.
Understanding Newton's 3 laws will provide a better grasp of the wonders of the universe that we live in.